So we want to welcome all of you who are connecting with us at this conference in Berlin. This is a conference organized by the World Council of Churches. 140 years ago, political leaders from 13 European countries, including the 14th, which is the United States of America, met here in Berlin to decide how they were going to divide the spoils of Africa. They didn't want to have a conflict over how they were going to share the resources of Africa. But today we are not here to celebrate the decision or the decisions they took. We are here to say what exactly happened, what are the implications of the decisions they made on the unequal relationships in the world today. We also want to say, is it possible that the church can make a contribution to the recovery of the broken relationships, but also to the legacy of inequality in the world? And for us to build up to this conference, there were many preparations and there were reflections on what needed to be part of this agenda. And I will want to invite those who contributed both to ideas but also to resources to think and to make this conference a success. We are here to make sure that we are faithful to what exactly happened in the past. So we are going to take a very serious historical, critical analysis of what happened, but we are not interested in being stuck in the past. We also want to see if there are ways in which the church can make a contribution. Some may ask, does the church have any special role to engage on this subject? The WCC has engaged on the questions of inequality, but particularly inequality based on race. For a long time, if you want to go back, in 1925, the conference in Stockholm actually identified race as one of the challenges in social and ethical issues that the ecumenical movement would need to address. But you would remember that in the 1970s, this issue was lifted up in Uppsala. The assembly in Uppsala was expected to be addressed by one of the fiercest critics of racial injustices in the United States, in the person of Martin Luther King, who was assassinated just before the assembly. The World Council of Churches, from that assembly, you would remember that it continued to take the question of race and racial inequality very seriously, establishing the program to combat racism in Southern Africa and in the rest of the world. The WCC is not complacent about this task, but it recognizes that racial prejudice, inequality, expressing itself in many forms, including the economy, are issues that the church needs to still address. So within our journey together, the pilgrimage of reconciliation, justice, and unity, this remains a central issue for the Council. To lead us in this reflection, I will ask those who are going to introduce our conversation, and I will start by inviting Reverend Christopher Eastil, who is the chair of the Association of Christian Churches in Germany, ACK, to bring his greetings on behalf of the ecumenical community here in Germany. I guess he's going to speak from the video.
Good morning and welcome to Berlin and to Germany. My name is Christopher Eastil and I am the chair of the German National Council of Churches, known as the ACK. I'm sorry that I can't be with you for this important ecumenical conference, marking the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference, though one member of our central staff Dr. Jochen Wagner, is taking part and will report back to our board and to our members. The ACK has 25 member and guest churches. Some are ancient churches from the Near and Middle East who experienced colonialism firsthand. Some are free churches with a strong social justice and peace tradition. Some are more recent migrant-based churches. But of course some, including my own Anglican tradition, were complicit in the sins of colonialism and racism, even though our membership now happily includes many people coming from the global south. At a time when righting the wrongs of racism and colonialism is itself coming under significant pressure and criticism, and in fact even acknowledging the sinfulness of our colonial past is being attacked, this conference is very timely. In your invitation, you address the paradox of Christianity being, on the one hand, an enabler to oppression and exploitation, yet on the other hand, also an enabler of liberation, equality, and equity. Martin Luther famously coined the phrase simul justus et peccator, simultaneously justified and sinner, which describes the same phenomenon. And so it is important to look both at the causes of the sin of racism and how that past still impacts our present, as well as what we can do going forward to achieve justice and repair the harms. I also commend your choice of venue, returning, so to speak, to the scene of the crime. We cannot unmake the 1884-1885 conference, but we can remake it so that a very different message, one of hope, liberation, and justice, comes out of this 2025 Berlin conference. On behalf of the ACK and our member churches, I wish you a successful and fruitful conference. I look forward to learning about the results of the 3 work streams so that we can see how we can continue and build on that work in our country and within our churches. God bless you all, and God bless the work that you have before you.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We are at the crime scene, hopefully not as complicit to the crime, but as those seeking to repair, to heal, and to correct the wrongs. I will now ask Dr. Silke Lechner, the member of the Evangelische Kirche in Deutschland, and also the liaison between the Berlin State and faith communities, a former colleague at the World Council of Churches. Please come and give us your remarks.
Yes, thank you, dear Kenneth. Good morning, brothers and sisters. Especially happy to be here. As Kenneth said, I'm a former team member of Kenneth and a former colleague of Massiva and Nikki and many others. It was a wonderful experience there. I'm here with one hat, and that is I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Churches and Religion for the city of Berlin. And in that capacity, I welcome you here. It's great that you're doing this conference. With my main hat, I'm here for EKD, the Protestant Church of Germany. I'm a member of the EKD Council, the highest decision-making body. We are a mix there of clergy and lay people, and I bring you the greetings of Bishop Kirsten, of our council chair. The Berlin Conference of AD 84, you will talk a lot about this. It was a major event that manifested the colonial power grab of European over African countries, a massive violation of international law, a racist geopolitical agenda. Archbishop Desmond Tutu once said, and you will all know this, When the first missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. They asked us to pray, and we closed our eyes. When we opened them again, the situation was exactly the opposite. We had the Bible and they had the land. The predecessors of the German churches have played a role in this development of racism. 140 years after the Berlin Conference, the WCC organizes a conference to strengthen the anti-racist agenda of churches around the world. So 140 years later, you turn the agenda upside down. So I decided to turn the idea of a word of greeting upside down. You are the experts on this topic. You do amazing work on anti-racist agendas in your specific context. We at EKD want to learn from this. Therefore, I will ask you to give a word of greeting to EKD. I will now distribute these cards. I'll start this now and explain the idea. One card for everyone. You pass it back. And I will give you 3 minutes, and I ask you to write an idea, a word of greeting to EKD. What can EKD do to strengthen an ecumenical anti-racist agenda? How can EKD be an anti-racist church? Write down an idea, a thought, a recommendation, a practical step. You may not know all the details about EKD, it's not so important. But what are your recommendations from your experience? 3 minutes now, and afterwards I'll distribute it. I'll take it back to EKD. I'll share the thoughts from you with them, your word of greeting. Time is running now. So feel free to just finish your thoughts, and thank you to Nikki for helping me to collect them. I will also join in collecting them. I'll share them with my colleagues. Thank you for your word of greeting. Around 60 years ago, in 1964, Martin Luther King made a transformative visit to Berlin. It was an important event, and in his sermon in a church very close to here, he said, "The Gospels speak directly and in parables about the responsibility which we have for one another, regardless of the differences of race and nation. Be blessed in the work that you do, and thank you for your partnership."
Thank you very much, Silke. This is a powerful gesture. One of the major challenges of colonization was at the level of knowledge production. Who knows, and how is that knowledge shared? What you just did now was to try and turn upside down this knowledge disparity and say, including those who were colonized, they know, they have something to share. And I think this is a journey that we will continue to walk together during this conference. How do we realize this epistemic justice, the way others know and how that knowledge is valued? Our next greeting comes from someone who has been working at the forefront of justice. That informs their work in development, in humanitarian aid, but also in the work of peace and justice. Reverend Dr. Dagmar Prun is the president of the world very big organization here in Germany, the Bread for the World, but that also comprises the work that they do in humanitarian work. We know your work very much confronting questions of injustice, and we want to welcome your remarks.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, partners and friends, and thank you very much, Kenneth, for the warm introduction. Dear brothers and sisters, it's an honor to welcome you at this important ecumenical conference on church and colonialism. The relationship between churches and colonialism is one that we must continue to examine with honest humility and courage. And after what you just said, Kenneth, I was thinking, even when you started and said only a few words about this African conference, my feeling was not only humility, my feeling was also shame. Shame is a feeling of the eye, and I could see myself when the moment you were speaking the words and describing just in a few sentences what this conference means, that for me it was even tough to look you in the eye, and I had to in a way close my eyes or put my eyes to the floor. And I was thinking maybe also the question of shame and to note that is a part of a discussion like this. Because for too long, this history has been neglected or framed in ways that obscure the harm done, harm that continues to shape power dynamics, narratives, and partnerships today. And I thank the WCC for putting this topic continuously on the agenda. At Brot für die Welt and DKH, we recognize that as faith-based ecumenical development organization rooted in European history, we are not neutral in the story. Our institutions, our way of working, and even our understanding of development have been shaped by colonial legacies. Acknowledging this is not about blame, it's about responsibility. And responsibility is the starting point for dialogue, reconciliation, and transformation. The words of Angela Davis speak clearly here. In a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist. And the same can be said about our approach to colonial legacies. It's not enough to acknowledge history. We must actively work to change the structures, the systems, and assumptions that sustain inequality today. That is why, at Bread for the World, we have embarked a long-term transformational process that seeks to confront colonial continuities and embed principles of equity, justice, and accountability into everything we do. This includes rethinking the way we define and measure development, reviewing our institutional language and communication, restructuring partnerships so that they are shaped not by donor priorities, but by mutual respect and shared decision-making. Creating space for diverse knowledge system, because you talked about education, about knowledge and what this means. And this is, in our perspective, the question of to make a diverse knowledge system and experiences to inform our strategy. This process has not been and is not easy. It requires time, commitment, a willingness to sit with discomfort, maybe also sometimes Paul's foolishness. But it's also deeply energizing because it connects us to a broader global movement for justice, one that's being led by communities and organizations across the global south who have long called for change. That same reason motivates our desire to work with sister organizations, churches, and other global civil society movements with a shared interest. Working together ecumenically for justice gives us an opportunity to listen, to challenge one another, and to build alliances for systemic change with our organizations, with our networks, and within the wider development for all humanity. We can always stay on this path, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Let this conference be more than a series of conversations. Let it be a space of commitment, a shared step in a longer journey toward transformations. Let us not only leave with insights, but with intentions, not only with analysis, but with action. I'm immensely grateful for this ecumenical journey together and hope that our ongoing common commitment will lead the way to a more just, equitable, and accountable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dagmar. You started by addressing this issue as a personal, emotional issue. And I think this is sometimes also an important starting point because individuals must come to terms not only with what happened in the past, but that they are beneficiaries of what happened in the past and that they are privileged as a result. And therefore, they are not neutral to the injustices that developed in the past. But you went on to say it's not only at a personal level, we need to address this issue structurally. And I think this is what makes this a very powerful journey together. We know that you are already doing it in Bread for the World. I'm one person who has been participating in your efforts to listen to the voices of those who are beneficiaries to development work and asking for them to co-create interventions in their own context. So we really appreciate your contribution. We hope this is the beginning of a longer journey together in this important process. Next is someone who was very much involved from the reflection at the beginning of this idea, wanting to say, how do former mission organizations make a contribution? Because when the Berlin Conference took place, the role of Christianity was ambivalent. On one hand, Christianity was complicit because it benefited from the partitioning of the land. Missionaries got land for free or cheap. They could enjoy the force of military for people who did not want to convert. So the missionary movement was a beneficiary to this colonial project. Yet on the other side, there were missionaries who found that this project was contrary to the heart of the gospel and used the same theological resources to start to forge a struggle against colonialism and racial segregation. And it is in this ambivalence that we have been enjoying engaging with you, Reverend Rainer Kiefer, the director of EMW, Evangelische Mission Weltweit. You will talk about it maybe in English, what it means. And we look forward to your remarks.
Vice Moderator Riley, Dr. Kenneth, dear friends, brothers and sisters. I'm happy to represent the Association of Protestant Churches and Missions in Germany, the EMW, at the beginning of a very important and relevant conference in search of a common anti-racism ecumenical vision. I'm pleased to share with you some reflections on the journey we have been on together as ecumenical institutions in the recent years. It's a long English term, the Association of Protestant Churches and Missions, and I could say EMW or EMW, serves as an umbrella organization for more than 20 mission organizations with a long history, and Dr. Kenneth has mentioned that, and works closely with Brot für die Welt and the Protestant Church in Germany, EKD. In accordance with our mandate, we coordinate the cooperation with the World Council of Churches, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, the Lutheran World Federation, and other ecumenical bodies. Together with partners in the Global South, we are engaged in theological ecumenical education, theological reflection, which is also valid in this very topic, and capacity building for churches and civil society. It has been a pleasure to be part of a planning team for our conference, which will begin today with wonderful music, hymns, and good words of hope. And it is so good to have Reverend Dr. Mikey Roberts with us. Indeed, we are at the end of a long journey, and it has been a great joy to work with our friends from the WCC, and I would like to highlight the name of Dr. Masiva Gunda in particular, and our friends from Brot für die Welt and the EKD. As far as I can remember, the idea for today's conference came to me in 2021. In the midst of the planning processes for the WCC assembly that took place in Karlsruhe in 2022. In the early summer of 2022, colleagues in Germany informed me of a possible ecumenical visit to Berlin in the days leading up to the assembly in southern Germany. In the context of our common pilgrimage for justice and peace, friends in Geneva, such as Professor Dr. Isabel Piri, and in other places, felt that such a visit to Berlin could be a good start for further conversations, including at the Assembly, regarding the challenge of overcoming colonial structures and racism in our cooperation. As you may recall, many colleagues in Germany were very busy these days in the summer of 2022, planning and organizing the upcoming assembly, after so many disturbing and disappointing experiences in the COVID years. This was the reason why we were, if I may say so, reluctant and cautious about the wonderful proposal from Geneva. We had our doubts as to whether we could really be good hosts in Berlin, just a few days before the great ecumenical event in Karlsruhe. I'm grateful that our concerns about the right time for a pilgrimage event were finally accepted. We postponed the event and agreed to start planning this conference immediately in the weeks after Karlsruhe. By the grace of God, we are happy to say, and also by making use of contacts and networks in Germany and around the world, it turned out that there might be an opportunity to plan an African-European roundtable organized by the WCC with the continued support of the German Foreign Office and the accompanying partner organizations in Germany I mentioned above. The EKD, Brot für die Welt, and EMW defined their role as an accompanying partner. As we initially thought that this roundtable could serve as a planning conference for the conference in 2025, we had to learn and accept that the African-European Ecumenical Roundtable would have its own value, and we experienced this in autumn 2024. So we went ahead, and the roundtable in the autumn became a milestone on the way to our conference today. I have the feeling that many of those who were there in autumn and discussed and reflected with us are here today, and this is a great joy. What we started in the autumn, we continued until now, until May 2025. We have also invited representatives of the international churches in Germany, and I'm glad that many have understood that we cannot think about overcoming racism in church and society without listening to and working closely with sisters and brothers from the so-called migrant churches in our country and those who experienced racism in our churches. I'm very much looking forward to the outcome of our conference and hope that the results of our discussions will be relevant to the WCC Central Committee meeting in Johannesburg in June 2025, just a few weeks ahead. Our friend and director of the Commission for Worldwide Mission and Evangelization, Peter Crushley, has been included in our prayers this morning. And therefore, let me just give this hint at the end of my little word of greeting. As the planning process for the 2028 World Mission Conference is about to begin, I am convinced that our discussions and outcomes will be relevant and welcomed in the years to come for the mission movement and the WCC in its complexity. So, thank you very much for listening to me. God bless our conference in the Dietrich Bonhoeffer House.
Thank you very much, Rainer. We know that you take this more seriously than simply organizing a meeting. We saw your recent publication, Decolonizing Mission, from your organization. So we can realize that you are not only doing this to fulfill a programmatic process together with the WCC. You believe it, and you want to see it being translated in the work that we continue to do together. So we thank you very much. One voice that is given much thought and reflection on the ecumenical social ethics and action in the World Council of Churches is none other the former General Secretary of the World Council of Churches, Reverend Dr. Conrad Reiser. When I was appointed as the director for the then Public Witness and Diaconia, and now Life, Justice, and Peace, I went to visit him, hoping that I could draw from some of his, maybe through osmosis, I could draw from his very critical ecumenical social ethics reflections and thoughts. And so we are grateful that as we start this meeting, he can give us some of his thoughts and reflections, maybe even his memories, where this journey has started to inspire our reflection during this conference. Please come and give us your remarks.
Yeah, dear friends, originally I was planning to participate in this conference online. And then I was suddenly asked to be reactivated as a former General Secretary because the present General Secretary and the moderator of the Central Committee today happened to be in Rome to participate in the enthronement of Pope Leo XIV. And Jerry Pillay has asked me to, on his behalf, to say a word of greeting at the beginning of this conference. And I happily or gladly agreed. Now, since this means being reactivated, excuse me, in my former role as General Secretary and formerly Deputy General Secretary, and serving particularly during a time when the agenda of the World Council of Churches was focused very much on the issues of racism. And I was part of the heavy debates, not least debates with our German churches. So the best way to greet you is to rethink some of the steps that the World Council of Churches, or many things, that the World Council has passed through. It's the purpose of this conference to reaffirm and strengthen the anti-racist ecumenical vision. The fundamental socio-political, ethical, and theological challenge of racism and racial discrimination were part of the ecumenical agenda since the early years, even prior to the establishment of the World Council of Churches. In particular, decades later, it was in response to the civil rights struggle in the United States and the Black Power movement, as well as the anti-colonial liberation struggles in Africa, that the WCC initiated the program to combat racism in 1969. And through the PCR, the need to actively confront white anti-Black racism against African people and people of African descent dominated the ecumenical agenda for more than a decade. After the World Consultation on Racism in Noordwijkerhout in 1980, the scope of ecumenical action against racism was broadened to include the concern for indigenous people, Dalits, as well as women under racism. The fundamental ecumenical commitments against racism were formally articulated in the affirmations and the covenant for the eradication of racism and the dismantling of economic, political, and social patterns that perpetuate the sin of racism at the World Convocation on Justice, Peace, and the Integrity of Creation in Seoul, 1990. The final abolishment of the apartheid regime in South Africa and of colonial rule in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Angola generated the ecumenical resolve to participate in fostering processes for the reconstruction of Africa, which was central to our agenda around the time when we prepared the Harare Assembly. At the same time, this initiated a new phase in the struggle against racism, which was marked internationally by the UN World Conference against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance at Durban, South Africa in 2001. The conference gave dramatic visibility to issues like reparation and compensation for past deeds like slavery, slave trade, and land dispossession. In response to the debates around the Durban Conference, the WCC Central Committee in 2002 and it was the last Center Committee that I attended as General Secretary, issued the substantial statement on being church and overcoming racism with the call, "It's time for transformative justice." During the last 2 decades, the need for the continued struggle against racism was overshadowed somewhat in the ecumenical agenda by the challenges of economic justice under the conditions of globalization and the call to overcome violence and to foster conditions for just peace. It is timely, therefore, that in this ecumenical year 2025, we should not only mark the commemoration of 700 years since the First Ecumenical Council in Nicaea in 325, or the 100 years since the First Ecumenical World Conference on Life and Work at Stockholm in 1925, but also for a critical assessment of the 140th anniversary of the Berlin Conference, with its consequences for colonialism, missionary outreach, and the spread of anti-Black racism in Africa. It's the intention of this meeting. I have not participated in any of the planning processes, but I learned that it is the intention of this meeting, through the process of critical remembering, as well as the reappraisal of the legacies of the Berlin Conference, especially for the entrenchment of racism against Africans and people of African descent, to facilitate the move towards reimagining and fostering a shared anti-racist ecumenical vision. In the context of the ecumenical pilgrimage for justice, peace, justice, reconciliation, and unity, it is hoped that anti-racism will become the norm in policy and practice within the ecumenical movement. The welcome fact that the conference is being co-hosted by the German Protestant Church and the German church-related agencies for mission, diaconia, and development strengthens the expectation that the renewed anti-racist vision will finally be owned and appropriated by the churches themselves and strengthen their witness against xenophobia, racism, and populist nationalism in the context of global migration. So I ask for God's blessing on your work together during these days in Berlin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for blessing the opening here, and also for taking us through the journey. We can see how rich the journey has been, and we are encouraged to realize that this is a timely meeting, it's a timely conversation, and we are going to draw from the resources of the journey the ecumenical movement has already walked. We are now going to transition and to come back to the wall here and to those who are also registered online. And we want to thank those who were joining us live on Facebook and other social media platforms. Please remember that we continue with this conversation, with this dialogue, reflection together. If you go back to the WCC Facebook platform, you will see when the next live sessions are, but most likely at 2:30 this afternoon, you can also join us and continue participating in these discussions. We now come to an end, and we will transition to our formalities here.